welcome to episode 259 of Checkpoint Chat. My name is Alessandro Barbosa. I'm joined by Matthew Figuera,
Your
as always.
your microphone looks bigger, but it's only because you got your little pop filter.
I just put listen, I'm trying. There's so many room reflections here because it's just, walls and nothing else to kind of like grab the sound. So I'm hoping having this little screen, if the sound is bouncing from behind me, it will catch it. If it's coming from the monitor forward, then maybe not so much. But you would expect a dynamic microphone that's only supposed to capture what's in front of it to kind of like prevent those reflections, but apparently not so much. So
have you ever
that's
tried
what I'm attempting again.
Just speaking more directly at the microphone?
I mean, I have tried that, but sometimes
you gotta like turn
the
gain down and just like put it in your throat. That's like how you eliminate any other.
That's innuendo phrasing.
Wow.
My goodness. I'm gonna be adjusting the gain a little bit because I'm still a bit worried about it. So I'm just gonna go off camera here.
Nice.
I can see you looking very concerned.
What's going on there?
Everything's okay.
We framed us perfectly, sense, and you've just ruined that. And I can't fix your side.
For audio listeners, that was, no problems there. You probably just heard the volume go up a little bit, but it's all okay. We're all okay.
Wouldn't there be a bit of a drag sound? Yeah, like what you're doing now.
Oh, can you hear the dragging sound?
No, I can't because Discord has really great noise cancellation.
Well, I'm hoping not, because I've got the NVIDIA noise cancellation stuff going. So that's meant to be improving the room echo as well, but it doesn't seem to work half the time. So AI just really not coming in clutch when it needs to.
Just doing its thing.
A real disappointment. Disappointment.
Speaking of AI,
how you been?
I was going to say, speaking of AI, have you seen? I've seen on probably the TikToks that the youths are using these days, where you can like feed. I don't know if it's ChatGPT or Google. I think it's Google. It's one of them. One of these big old AI companies.
What is this called? Gemini, I think, or something.
I don't know. There's so many damn names to like keep track of now. You can feed. I think it is Gemini. Let's just we're calling it Gemini on this show. Okay, if
not Pisces, not
Archimedes.
Archimedes, yeah, that's what I'd name.
Archimedes. Yeah. You can feed it reams of information like medical journals and whatever, and you can prompt it to create a podcast episode. And
what?
AI generates, this seems to be a new thing where it will generate like a podcast episode or just a discussion between AI people, like talking about the topic. So explaining it to you, in a conversational manner. And honestly, it's quite insane because first of all, the voices sound really good. And it sounds good.
It's actually producing audio. It's not a transcript of what the
it sounds like you and I are talking. And the reason it sounds so good is because it's got the right tone and the inflection. So like, for example, I'm thumb sucking this, but the first host will be like, so let's talk about having a headache, And then the second person will be like, yeah, I hate it when I get a headache. Like, just the way the conversation happens, it seems the way their tone goes up and down when they're asking a question or they're emphasizing something. And it's a clever way of, I immediately thought if I were a high school student and I thought, shit, like, I hate reading my notes. Let me just throw it into this AI and it can just talk me through it like I'm listening to an episode on history or whatever it is, on geography. Yes. And I just thought, shit, it's wild that is the level of it now.
It just got me thinking now, like, okay, I'll come back to the podcast thing, but you mentioned like high school students. I hadn't actually like considered that really a lot. When I'm sure you noticed this when you grew up. I know I was in like grade 6, grade 7, you're probably like 1 or 2 years above. But when Wikipedia like came out and became a thing, it was like this flashpoint, frowned upon, like, oh, you can't use. To be fair, there were times when I put through like a project or whatever, especially for subjects that I really hated, like biology, where it was like straight up copy paste from Wikipedia, and I got really good at like formatting it so it didn't look like it.
Yeah.
And I think it caught a lot of, especially like teachers and whatever, off guard, because they now had to adjust to this sort of thing. And I imagine AI is like that next inflection point where it's like, how do we determine whether this is like real or not, especially as these things start getting better and better at, like you said, inflection and conversational stuff. And I assume that extends to writing as well. But the fact that it can do a full-on audio podcast is nuts.
Just based on random information you feed it.
That's crazy.
It like analyzes it, and so for example, you can feed it, like I said, medical journals, and say, like, condense this into a 30-minute podcast, and give me like the key takeaways, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because like AI is obviously the sad reality is that it will replace some jobs. It'll
100%,
replace like some menial jobs or jobs that can just be automated. But it's fascinating seeing how it's also going to create jobs, which is normal. Like the sort of thing does happen. And I heard a term this week that made me laugh, but it also, I'm like, it's probably going to be a thing, a prompt engineer, where, because there is an art to how you get AI to respond to you. Like the reality is, some people like AI is useless, but they'll give AI like a shit prompt. Sorry, like that's the reality. But if you become good at telling AI how to respond to you, I mean, this person gave some basic tips of. So, for example, they had a whole acronym thing, like they call it CHASE, and C stands for. It's not that, but that's the system they have. But it's like point one: the first thing you tell AI to do is to respond to you as the person you want it to respond to you as. So, if you're asking it to write you a script for a TV show, the first thing you say is respond to me. Well, not respond to me, like, give me your response as if you're a renowned film director or a renowned script writer. So it's just interesting. There's things you don't think about, and how to get our, and just the podcasting blew my mind. It's like, that's, you and I do a podcast. We don't even have to do it anymore. We just feed it all the reviews from the internet and say, just spit us out a podcast from the perspective of two bozos from South Africa, and bam.
Specifically like that.
Bam, you got us.
And I'm sure it's like anything, it's pretty easy to pick up right now. Or maybe not easy, but like there are certain parts of it that you could definitely tell. Yeah. But it's going to get better and better and better. And I think, listen, there are a lot of ethical issues around AI. And I, completely understand that when it comes to like the data that it's trained on, and how, that uses existing stuff from people, and how it can be, plagiarized, because you're never giving, you aren't giving permission for that stuff to be used, or, sometimes you are, and you're not actually realizing it.
Yeah.
But I think as well, like you said, it's going to replace some jobs for sure. It's going to create some for sure. But I think where it really shines, and where I think a lot of people misunderstand its use, is just enhancing a lot of jobs.
100%.
Like I get quite irritated when there's a lot of reporting around like, oh, Game Studio X is using AI to do X, and the immediate thought is like, oh, it's replaced the jobs that used to exist for that stuff. And it's like, not really, at least not currently, because what it is enabling people to do is do their jobs faster and do their jobs without the mundaneness of certain elements. And I know that because it definitely has made my job slightly easier, where if I am thinking of a particular algorithm, like I want to do this, this, and that, it can spit out code at me and be like, this is how you would go about that. I still need the know-how to look at that and be like, this is correct, or this is meeting my needs. But it has saved me a lot of time, kind of like figuring that out. And that is like incredibly useful. I don't know a single person in the company I'm in, at least from a programming perspective, that's not using AI. Like it's built into the tools that we use now, so that it predicts stuff while you're writing stuff. And it makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
But by that token, it's also scraping every bit of code I write to try and get better and better. So there's a balance between like the privacy aspect and how it helps your life. I do think, there's all this like people get really funny with like, oh, this AI got something wrong. And it's like, cool, yeah, I got it wrong today. But look back 2 years ago, it was getting a lot of shit wrong. It is not getting that stuff wrong now. It is getting better and better and better. And I think there definitely should be discussions on what the limitations of it should be. But I also think we need to stop being so guarded with how it can enhance people's lives in certain aspects. Yeah, that's just my opinion. No. I don't think it's a black and white issue.
No, I agree with you. It's the same. I thought like, shit, AI is going to take my job until I try to use it to do my exact job. And I'm like, oh, there's definitely limitations. However, the things it can do to help me do my job better, I mean, I use it daily in the sense of I write something and I'll feed into AI and I'll be like, does this read correctly?
Exactly.
Like, just simple things like that. And I'm not feeding it confidential information. I'm a little bit wiser than that. But just I've written this thing. Just does it make sense? And 9 out of 10 times it's like, yeah, your passage reads perfectly or it's concise. However, like here's like an alternate if you want to consider it, whatever. But it picks up things that, like, I mean, the languages in general are complicated and there's lots of different rules, but English also has a lot of silly rules. And honestly, I don't know every single rule by heart, and there's often nuance which I might not know or I'm unsure of. AI just takes me questioning that away. I just put in and it's like, this is the correct. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I obviously double check or make sure. Yeah, it's great. It's like, I use it for things like that. And like, it's not going to replace my job in the sense, I mean, maybe one day, but at the moment it's not like, I need a creative idea for this game. It's going to just give me like rubbish. Sorry, like generic stuff, whatever. Job, but in terms of making me do my other parts of my job better, like 100%, from there I use it all the time.
No, like, and I think there's always been these little flashpoints of like, I would love to go back and see the reaction. That's the thing, you probably wouldn't see it because like the spread of social information wasn't as big as it is now. But like when Photoshop first became a thing, like would you have a lot of artists going? Yeah, photography's dead, or like the art of, making shots on your camera look as good as they can without post-production is dead. And, but those two things exist in tandem still today. There is a nuance and an art to, I mean, the popularity of film has become such a big thing now because there is this desire to have that sort of old and vintage look to pictures and that warmth that you can't really replicate in post. But how many jobs now are specifically about how good you are at digital art and creating digital media? It created a whole new sector, and like I don't think you could think of a world now without that. And I think we're on a similar path. Obviously, it's a bit different because fundamentally, like Photoshop is a tool. It is not necessarily something that does a job for you, but it automates a lot of things that I think people take for granted now. And I think that's where we're headed. That's the sort of thing that it might be used for. But there obviously need to be some guardrails because this is something that learns by itself to a degree. And I just think that needs to be, we need to be careful about that thing like anything else. But I think it is something fundamentally that can improve a lot of people's lives. I often give examples of the massive strides it's making in the medical field. Like you talk to any doctor, you talk to most engineers, and they're like, this is making my job safer and picking up things that we would never be able to do prior to this. And that is important, I think. Do I think that means that artists should have their work stolen? No, but I think there is a nuance to this discussion outside of AI bad, and that.
Like you said, it's not black and white. There's
no.
Yeah.
But I think like anything, there's nuance to so many conversations now online that is just completely missed because it's this radical, this desire to make things black and white. And I just think there's so much discussion that's missed out there. But yeah, that's just my opinion. I think we're going to see a lot more of it, and I'm curious to see how it's going to keep evolving and iterating on what's currently there. Yeah. Just like I love seeing video games evolve and iterate over time and get better and better, and sometimes worse and worse.
Landed that plane so well.
Yeah, I would like to see AI pull off a pivot like that. Definitely
My
couldn't.
God.
Yeah, because it's probably not logical to never come to that conclusion.
I was busy watching the discussion like, whoa, what just happened?
Whoa. Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not going to store that in my data banks. We'll never do that on our podcast.
Hilarious.
Let's check from chat. We talk about video games, and boy, have there been some banger video games coming out lately. This year is delivering, and I think it's kept its best hits for these last few weeks, but also kept its longest games for the last few weeks. We have both been playing Metaphor ReFantazio, and I've heard it said so many different ways. I like to say Fantazio, almost like Disney's Fantasio. Isn't that a thing? I don't know.
I think it is. This is the wrong screen.
Whoa! I was about to say there's no gameplay there. Metaphor ReFantazio, if you're not aware, is the latest game from actually the creators of the Persona series. Basically, what happened was the director of that series and a lot of people who've been working on that series for a long time, after Persona 5, they were just like, we want to do something new. And so they formed their own team, and Atlas kind of like retained them. And so the Persona series is still going forward, but it's got a new leadership, like kind of leading that, like a changing of the guard, whereas the old Persona team is now made this. And I think there is a lot of Persona DNA in this, 100%, but there is so much that's also new that I think it's kind of the Elden Ring of this sort of style of gameplay, where it's introduced a very similar system, but with enough tweaks that has got a lot of new people in. And, you are one of those new people. So I'd love to hear your perspective on how you've been enjoying Metaphor thus far.
I wanted to ask, so just to go back to when was this game announced? Like, did we know 2 years ago that Metaphor was coming?
It was sort of announced not too long after Persona, but it was so early at that point that, like, if you weren't really following Persona and that sort of team's movements, you would have completely missed it. But then about 2 years ago, it re-emerged, and it was a lot of like, oh, this game is still actually in development, like it's still coming. And that's when they just kicked off like the marketing for it, and it's just been sustained since then.
Okay, because I feel like this game came out of nowhere, honestly, at least on my radar, where just on a day or the month leading up to it, it's like, oh yeah, that Persona game's coming out. And I was a bit confused because what do you mean they're not making? Is Persona 6 like what's going on? So this was completely new to me, and it's funny because going into this, we got review code. It was a late Saturday evening. I think I'd finished, like I was looking for my next game to play basically, and I knew like there are things like Call of Duty coming up, and there's a few things on the back burner which I haven't gotten around to. But it was one Saturday evening, and it was late. It was maybe 11 in the evening, and I just saw Metaphor. And I had an actual conversation. I mean, I didn't verbalize a conversation, but internally I had a conversation of, am I really going to commit to like a full 100 hours plus to this game? Because unlike you, when I start a game, like I feel compelled to finish it. Like I feel, unless I'm absolutely hating it, like I don't like playing a game 30, 40 hours and then not seeing it end. So it is a thing of, okay, am I committing to this? And I played the first hour or two and I was like, yeah, it's very stylish. It looks cool. Like the turn-based combat is neat, and I'm sure there's a lot of depth to it. And fast forward, I've played, I think, about 25 hours now. So I've probably barely done like the first...
already? Holy shit.
I've probably barely played the introduction, given that this is the scope of these games. But I'm thoroughly enjoying this game. It's got me, and we'll talk a lot about why it's got me, but let's just say that like I want to finish this game, and at some point I would like to revisit maybe Persona 5 to see the two differences, because you've said there's a lot of similarities in DNA and how the game works and whatever, and I can kind of understand it now. I suppose kicking off with, in Persona I've always heard you've got to manage your time. There's a calendar, there's days, you've got to decide what you're going to do on certain days. And I never quite understood how that worked because I've never played a Persona game. So in my head, I always thought, okay, in Persona, do you wake up as your character, then you've got 30 minutes to go do whatever in that day. Like I never understood how the system works, but now I get it, where it's the same in Metaphor, where you start a day and you can do 2 activities in that day. So whether, for example, it's funny though how it's broken up. The morning is always a cinematic or a cutscene, and then your afternoon and your evenings are when you do things. So, for example, during the afternoon, you can go, I want to go do that dungeon. That's going to take the whole afternoon. And it shows you a little icon saying like, oh, this is going to actually pass time if you commit to this. And that's how the time's broken down. And now I understand the appeal or the system of, you've got to be careful, not careful, but you've got to choose how you want to do things, because eventually you get to a point in the game where, there's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of things you can level up. There's a lot of people you can talk to. There are a lot of like side quests or bounties you can pursue. So how do you choose to break it up? And there's something, I don't know what it is, but there's something so satisfying, or soothing's the wrong word, but there's something like nice about that rhythm of I wake up today, I tick off a thing, go to sleep, wake up the next day, do something else, pass some time till I get to the main objective, which is due in 10 days time, whatever it is. I'm just enjoying that loop, that gameplay loop of doing things on a daily system and then progressing the story like that. And I'm sure other games, similar games exist, but I've not played a JRPG like this. Like that comes to mind. So it's completely new to me, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I also can't think of another game that makes time so purposeful. I think it's funny that you just came off playing Dead Rising, because I think that's another game that kind of takes that approach where it's, I know a lot of people look at this and they go, oh, I hate feeling pressured with time, because like that is my life, that is my day to day, and I 100% get that. But I think it adds such a layer of, you have to think about how you're spending time in this game. And I think it gives weight to your decisions that a lot of other open world-ish, hub-based, whatever RPGs just don't. Because how many times have you heard that thing of like, oh, there is this big threat to the world, but hey, I can go do 10 side quests for 20 hours and that threat doesn't really move or, become worse as a result. The Zelda thing, the Breath of the Wild thing, where Zelda's waiting to be rescued, but hey, I've got to go and find every nook and cranny in this 100%. World before I can go. And I think a lot of people don't think about that, and that's totally fine, but it's sort of like narrative dissonance that I think the Persona series especially like tackles head on. I do think, it's a system you have to get used to, because there are, at least in the older games, there were very easy ways to like work yourself into a corner where you have definitely not spent your time correctly, but that only really manifests way down the line. And then you're in a sort of like a bit of trouble because you don't have the flexibility to kind of correct that. I think they've got a lot better with that over each game. Like I think Persona 5 was a bit more forgiving of that, and Metaphor ReFantazio I think gives you a lot more flexibility in that regard as well. But it does that without taking away the importance of thinking about how you're going to spend your days, thinking about which attributes you're trying to level up, which relationships you're trying to move forward, which in turn affect like the effectiveness of those party members in combat, etc., etc. There's a lot to consider, and I think that can definitely feel overwhelming. But I think based off what I've played so far, Metaphor does probably the best job of introducing those things in a manner that makes sense. You don't feel completely lost as to what to start with and what directions to go in, and in turn end up wasting a lot of time at the beginning of the game. So in that regard, I can see why people have been onboarded in a much better way, and as a result are probably enjoying the game a lot more. It is really interesting to me that like you and Darren, having never played the series, jumped into one that seems the most odd, because it's like this weird fantasy setting with very flowery, interesting writing, as opposed to the slice of life modern day Persona series. But it's cool. I think the setting is really interesting and really different from Persona. I think it's got a real Game of Thrones vibe to it, which I am definitely enjoying. And the way it's structured its overall narrative so far, with the idea of there's almost like this popularity contest that you've got to win. It's very different, and I really like how that's framing the days that go by. So yeah, I'm having a great time with it, even though I've like played maybe 7 or 8 hours.
Where are you in the story?
Like,
what's the last thing that's happened?
Yeah, very light spoilers for the beginning if you're worried, but it's basically I got to the funeral of the king who literally dies in the first 30 seconds of the game.
Oh my god, spoils.
And yeah, and that is where I see the game now like kicking off. It's like, cool. Yeah. We've introduced the combat to you. We've introduced this idea of sort of the day system, but now you are given the chance to actually mess with these systems in an open way. We're not going to like, hold your hand through these things. And that's like 6-7 hours in, but I think they give you enough interesting things to do in that time that both teach you and keep you engaged, which I think has been a core problem with the Persona series, even in 5. And why a lot of people bounce off in the first few hours. So it's props to the team for, I think, getting that right for the very first time.
Yeah. It's funny you said it, because it is like, whoa, like it took you 8 hours to get to, where the main premise of the game actually kicks off. And that's why I asked, because like, I don't actually know if you've seen, like, I think you have an idea of what the game is, but have you actually seen, where it's going, whatever? Yeah, but what's also been so interesting to me is that, again, like, I've never touched a Persona game. I've like seen screenshots, I've barely seen gameplay. Honestly, it's just one of those franchises where I'm pretty sure I'd enjoy it, but I've just not engaged with it in any form. This game does not provide you a huge open world to run through and explore. Which I just didn't expect. It's literally just hubs with cutscenes to dungeons, whatever. And I thought, that kind of makes sense, because in Persona, you typically just in one town, right? Or one city. And
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, so I guess that makes sense. But it's weird, because now I'm seeing like, oh, this is how this game's structured. And it is a thing of, it is a lot of information initially. And they do onboard you, right? Like, don't get me wrong, it's not a criticism, but there is a lot of information to like wrap your head around. Yes. But the moment you get into that rhythm, like I said earlier, of, oh, okay, there's a day system. You need to figure out how you're going to structure your days. The moment you figure that out, it just feels good to play. And we haven't even got into the turn-based combat, which itself is really good as well. I just wanted to touch on one thing, though. When you mentioned Dead Rising earlier, this is a very different time system. Just to be clear, like Dead Rising, there's a persistent clock, which is like, okay, you've got to get your shit done. Whereas here, it's like you just have to choose how you want to spend your time, but you don't have to like rush off to do something or whatever. It's just you literally deciding how you're going to do your day. So from that point of view, I don't find it stressful at all. It's more just the, am I going to talk to this person now? Am I going to go, talk to that random person to up some other stats of mine, whatever. But just on the combat itself, like Persona turn-based, it's got all the things I'd expect from a turn-based game today, but there's a lot of depth to it. It's interesting, because remember, I'm coming from a Final Fantasy point of view, where I know Final Fantasy, that franchise, like inside out, all the turn-based games. So I see a lot of similarity, and it's obviously not unique to Final Fantasy, but that's my frame of reference. And you see the typical thing of like, if you're in the back row, you take less damage. If you're in the front row, you do more damage, etc., etc. You can guard to take less damage, but you give up your turn. But where this game, I think, shines, and I'm sorry I keep comparing it to Final Fantasy. Again, that's just my frame of reference. But there's archetypes, which it's kind of like the job system in Final Fantasies of yesteryear. Where, so as any of your characters, you can choose what archetypes are going to be. So, and that's the typical I can have one character as my warrior who's going to be like offensive, do some heavy physical damage. I can have somebody as a mage who's going to do fire, magic and elemental damage, and then I can have a healer who's going to be my support. The thing is, Metaphor has so many. Like I've unlocked, and you get like your default like a warrior, okay? But then there are things that warrior upgrades to. There are things that a mage can upgrade to, and I'm still 25 hours in unlocking new jobs and upgrading existing ones, and there's just an insane level of depth there, because you can get even more in the weeds of, okay, you can do certain jobs, but you can also choose to inherit some other abilities from other jobs that you've perfected. So it's like, I can be a mage who has a high magic stat, but I can also inherit like healing from the healer archetype, because I want to have like a bit of a hybrid character, whatever. So I'm sure people who want to do number crunching and min-maxing and just doing crazy things towards the end of the game are having an absolute blast mixing and matching different builds or characters or whatever. So yeah, tons of depth in that front, and it's fun to like play through all of them. I mean, you also like, I find that there are side quests or there's certain things that kind of incentivize you to experiment and try, and you're not locked into a thing. Like, it's pretty not rewarding. It's pretty lenient in that, you know, you obviously, if you're going to play as the warrior, you're going to have to level it up, whatever. But you get items that let you fast track that leveling, and you do get them like pretty abundantly. So you'll burn through them quickly, but you must never feel like, oh, I can't mess around with jobs, whatever, because they're actually really good at giving you tools and resources to like fast track something. If you just want to experiment a bit, or you know, get a high level to a certain archetype, whatever. Yeah, so it's been fun seeing all the different kinds and seeing like, it's also that typical thing of they excelled one thing but they're weak in another thing. They've got elemental bonuses on certain fronts, but they've got weaknesses on other fronts. So it's quite cool to see how do you balance like what is a good party composition, you know, what is the correct mix of characters, and you know what is just fun to play with, or what is best for the situation at hand. And you know, it's so easy to change between them.
Yeah, I think I really like the depth that's been added to this combat, because I've always considered Persona's turn-based combat probably one of the best, you know, out there. But I think it was very easy in the past to settle into the same sort of rhythm for every combat scenario, where, especially in 5, they emphasized exposing weaknesses. So a lot of enemies have, you know, an affinity to block certain amounts of damage and be weak to certain elements or certain types of damage. And in Persona 5, you were constantly trying to expose that, because when you delivered weak damage to an enemy, it would sort of like down them. And if you could down all of them in a turn, then you could do an all-out attack where every member in your party would do like some sort of damage to them. And that was kind of like your rhythm. You were trying to expose those weaknesses, get them down, do all-out attacks, and try and mitigate your enemy taking turns, which, you know, works really well, but it forces you to play in a certain way. And especially when in the past, you know, your party members each had a persona, which was like an archetype, like a healer, a mage, a fire person, a, you know, wind person, whatever. And your main character was the one that kind of consolidated those powers into a sort of hybrid. So there was less flexibility in terms of you could change your party composition, but that was ultimately your job system. You couldn't change what jobs each character had. So from that perspective, Metaphor is a massive upgrade. The fact that you can keep certain party members that have their own stats, but then change the archetype that they use, which then, you know, utilizes those stats. And I also think that the turn system is a much better method of balancing exploiting weaknesses while also thinking about how your turns play out. So the big change here is the ability to pass your turn, and also the fact that like exploiting a weakness gives you back half a turn. So you start each round where you have like, for each character in your party, you have a turn. So you'll have 3 people in your party, you have 3 turns. if you expose a weakness, you get half a turn back, which can be an action that a character takes. If you pass your turn, you use half a turn to move to the next person in your party. So if you're like, cool, this enemy is really weak to fire damage, but the character I'm on has no way to use that, and the only way they can do damage is physical damage that the enemy is actually quite defensive against or can block, then you would likely want to pass your turn and, manage your turn resource like that to make the best of your turn. And the enemies work in the same fashion, which is really it's a cool thing. Yeah, it's a cool thing to balance and to like think about in a turn-based game, rather than just like, it's this character's turn, then it's this character's turn. Then I think it's very similar to the way that Final Fantasy VII back in the day, or I guess 6 introduced this, but like the active time battle, where it's still turn-based, but you're taking into account how characters recharge their turn and when to use their turns. It's a fundamental rethinking of how turn-based combat works, and I think this is like an evolution of that, and I really, really like it. I think I was telling you earlier this week, it's going to be tough to go back to a Persona where you don't have this level of depth in the combat, and I don't think that makes it impossible, but I do think it's such a big change that it's going to set the tone going forward for at least this series, and I think a lot of other turn-based games are going to look at this as inspiration. I think it's a really, really good combat system that just has a ton of depth, and I'm excited to like pick it apart and start, exposing all these new archetypes and using them, and really thinking about how I'm going to make the best out of my party. So from that aspect, I think it's really bolstered combat, and I think the other big improvement is just the way you move around the world and actually get into combat. The fact that you can kill lower level enemies without hopping into the turn-based aspect is really cool. It's
nice.
It's an element they pulled from Persona 5, where you could only do that in non-main dungeons. Like in main dungeons you couldn't do that, but they had this like farming dungeon that you could take on during every day to kind of like grind and level up, and they allowed you to do it there. I think making that a core pillar of the gameplay is smart, especially when if you attack enemies in the open world before you engage them in turn-based combat, you can actually stun them so that they enter combat stunned. But by the same token, if you get attacked by them or you mistime your attacks, then you enter the turn-based phase stunned. So you've got to balance like, oh, this enemy's really tough, I'm actually not going to try and stun them beforehand, I'm just going to hop straight into turn-based combat, as opposed to taking a bit of a risk and trying to stun them beforehand. It's really, really cool. I think, again, it just makes moving around the dungeons a lot more interesting, rather than the sort of Pokemon approach where you're moving through, you're colliding with enemies, you have to fight them, and you rinse and repeat that. So I love it. I really think they've made some cool decisions.
As in just two things. So the first thing is that I feel that, turn-based games have been around for decades. I feel like this is almost like a greatest hits, where it's taken the best lessons and put them into one package. Because like it ticks all the boxes. Like we've said, really good turn-based system, good like job system and the archetype feature, whatever. Just all the cool things, that you'd want from a turn-based game, like in one place. I feel like it's ticked all the right boxes. And then secondly, to go back to that low level, the fact that you can just insta-kill them. I had such an interesting thought it was earlier this week when I was playing, where I've actually just been ticking off all the side quests. And a part of me thinks like, oh, do I need to do this? Like, should I not just like main track a bit, whatever? But it kind of evens itself out, because like I ended up doing two big side quests, whatever, and I was maybe 2 or 3 levels or a couple levels higher than I needed to be for my next main dungeon. But then I just flew through that main dungeon. I could just one-hit everything, and I got through it so quickly. So from a time management point of view in real life, it's like I didn't, not that you feel punished for doing side quests, but I didn't feel like I'd wasted time doing the side quests. It's like, oh, it just made this main dungeon a breeze, where I could have done it the other way around, right? I could have done the main dungeon and then just breeze through those side quests. So it kind of like evens out, if that makes sense. And it's kind of nice to just at that point go to the main dungeon going, oh, so I ran out of footage. It was just nice to have the thing of like, oh yeah, I've spent some time like doing actual fights in these side quests. Now I can just focus on the main story and just like breeze through this main dungeon.
Yes.
I really enjoyed that.
I think it makes it for more respectful of your time, which, listen, I love Persona. I love 4 and 5, but I do think it, it's not perfect. And I do think there are moments where it is disrespectful of your time. It runs into these issues of like where it forces you into grinding, and in doing so forces you into running through dungeons, especially in 4. 4 was egregious with this, where it was like the only way to grind to get high levels, which was kind of required, otherwise you'd just get smoked by like the story dungeons further down the line, was to rerun dungeons you had gone through and just go every single floor, getting into battles, doing that rinse and repeat. And it just felt like it was wasting your time purposefully. And I think 5 got slightly better with that. It still wasn't the best, but so far Metaphor is just so much better in that regard. And I think this is why a lot of people are clicking with it a bit more, because it feels like it's rewarding the time you spend with it rather than forcing you to do some not so great things to kind of get to the meaty, interesting bits.
Yeah.
And even though, it's still a big time investment, I've seen a lot of people saying they were not able, but like comfortably finishing this within 60, 70 hours, as opposed to I took 120 with Persona 5. And even then that was like, seems the average, not even like super completionist.
Yeah.
I think that's again because it's not forcing you to do shit that you don't want to do just so you can progress, which is a great change for me. So it's a great game. I'm glad that more people are playing this, because I think it's going to entice people to give other series of this ilk a try. And I think that's great, because the more people who play great games like Persona, and I assume Metaphor is going to become its own series going forward.
I'm sure it will.
I think it's just awesome, because I love these RPGs. I think they're really, really good. And I'm glad to see more people enjoying them and getting to experience them and kind of find the love in them that I've found over the years.
Yeah. We'll definitely be talking about it for weeks and months to come.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if I can finish this game before the end of the year, it will be a miracle.
It blows my mind. I've played it. It's 2 weeks now, right, since we got code, and I've thrown myself at this game, and I say like I've only done 25 hours. 25 hours is a long fucking time.
It's a lot of time. It's a lot of time.
But I think like in the grand scheme, like where am I in the story? Am I even like 10% of my way through, like 15, 20? Like I don't know. The story still could go anywhere. So, but I'm enjoying it. That's, if you take one thing away from this review or in progress, whatever that, we're both enjoying the game, and it's long, 100%. But we're both going to enjoy playing however long it is.
100%. It's great. I love the look of it, the flair. The music is so fucking good. But like, I'm not at all surprised by that, because it's the same composer from the previous Persona series, and it's a soundtrack I'm going to be listening to for years to come. I think that battle theme is just spectacular. It's so good. I'm having a great time, and I hope a lot of people are having a good time with this game. It seems to have come out the gate super strong in terms of sales, and I think it hits like the highest number of Steam players for this series. Well, blasting past Persona 5's numbers. So I think people are really, really curious about this and seemingly having a great time with it, which makes me happy.
Will it be RPG of the year? I wonder.
Who knows? I mean, there's been big ones. There's been, Rebirth. You got Dragon Age coming out next week or this coming week.
Time for all these games.
I mean, who knows? You've got Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, which came out earlier this year. Like, there are a lot of top tier RPGs that have come this year. So it's a tough thing. But I can already see Metaphor being really high on my just overall game of the year list for sure.
Oh no, 100%. It's also that conversation of like timing. Like I love, don't get me wrong, I love Final Fantasy Rebirth, but with award season around the corner, I'm thinking about Metaphor because I'm playing it right now. Like it's
recency bias is definitely a thing. Yeah.
So
that's where Alan Wake 2 lost out last year because it just came too late. If I had to look back, that's a game that I finished in January this year,
Same.
and it's still like one of the best games I've played this year. So
Yeah.
Just makes me want to get into that DLC because it seems to be very good.
Yeah, I need to play the DLC.
Yeah.
Cool. That is
shifting
metaphor.
gears quite considerably. From a 100-hour turn-based RPG to a very brief blockbuster shooter. Call of Duty Black Ops 6. My goodness, it's a lot of those Black Ops games.
A lot of Black Ops games. Have you seen how many Call of Duty games there are? I looked at the
many. I mean,
I looked at the wiki page. Yes, I was like, damn, that is a lot of
ridiculous.
Call of Duties we've had.
It is the cash cow that keeps being milked and delivering for Activision, really.
100%. So
and now Microsoft.
Yeah, Black Ops 6 launched yesterday, 25th of October, and just for some context, it's an interesting one purely because, like you said, Microsoft now officially owns Activision Blizzard. The deal closed properly 2023 October, I think, and this is the first day one launch on Game Pass. The first day one Call of Duty on Game Pass. So I'm dying to know long term, what does this mean for Xbox and Game Pass and just Call of Duty numbers? Like, is it going to get more people to play Call of Duty that might not have tried it otherwise? Like, I don't know if we'll ever see these numbers, but it's just such an interesting environment because this is what people were hoping for, right? Oh my God, Microsoft's buying Activision. Are we going to get day one Call of Duty? The answer is yes. And here we are on Call of Duty 15, whatever the hell this is in the overall franchise number.
This is the big bet. I mean, this is what Microsoft purchased. You know, they'll say mobile gaming and the revenue generated from that, and I don't think they're lying. But this, from the Activision and console business standpoint, is the biggest bet, and why they went after it. Because, like, if there is something that is going to bolster Game Pass numbers, it's this. If this does not move the needle on, you know, the subscriber numbers that haven't really been moving in the past year, 2 years, it to me signals, and I'm sure to Microsoft signals, that they have reached the peak on that, and they've plateaued in terms of bringing in new subscribers. Now, I definitely think it's going to improve the subscriber numbers, but to what degree that they need them to improve to actually see it as a marked difference, I'm not sure. You know, how do they balance that against potential lost sales? Which is more, you know, which one is more important to them? If they lock in someone 6 months on Game Pass as opposed to single sale, then definitely they'll take that because that's A, more money, and B, the potential to keep someone locked in because they keep seeing the value in staying subscribed. So it's an interesting thing. And like you said, I don't know if we'll ever see the full, you know, breadth of those numbers and the impact on it. But yeah, I think it's an interesting time for Microsoft, and this is, you know, the thing that is going to really test Game Pass going forward. But from a game standpoint, listen, I think Modern Warfare 3 last year was definitely a thing that they had to get out the door very quickly, and it definitely showed in terms of the campaign. Campaign was like 4 hours. It was very boring, I thought, in comparison to the previous two Modern Warfares, which I thought were great campaigns. So far, I haven't finished Black Ops 6. So far, I appreciate some of the things it's doing in terms of mission structure. I think there's far more freeform elements to them and the ability to tackle them in the ways that you want. But so far, I'm kind of like, I'm a bit underwhelmed by what I've played. It's not hitting the same like blockbuster vibes for me, or very, you know, turn off your brain, mindless, really fun shooting for me. And so, you know, I've only played the first 3 or 4 like core missions, and I respect what they're doing, but it's just, I don't know if I'm going to finish the campaign because I'm just like, there are so many other games that I really want to spend time with that even an 8-hour campaign here doesn't feel so far worth my time. So I know you've had a different opinion of it so far.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you from an invested point of view, where I've only really done the opening missions. So like super early days, but I've really, look, I want to say enjoyed, but it's more like I'm more intrigued. Like I want to see where the story goes, but I'm also just more enjoying the gunplay and the feel of the game as opposed to like really invested in the story. I mean, just from the get go, it Call of Duty at this stage, like we know they've done it year on year. It feels good to move around. I think we'll touch on it more, but like there's this new Omni movement feature that they're touting. The shooting feels good. Like there's no complaints from that point of view. But there's also this interesting thing where, and I don't know how much they're going to lean into this throughout the whole campaign, but there's a stealth element where, at least the missions I've done thus far, you can go in completely quietly for the most part, or you can go in guns blazing. They let you choose. And it's like, I mean, it's not like they've never done it in Call of Duty. I think Cold War, I mean, I lose track. There's so many Call of Duties now, but there are some that have been like, you can do stealth, whatever. But yeah, it's interesting. Like I hear what you say. Where's that blockbuster thing to this? Like, is it still going to come later, or like I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it depends on what you're looking for in terms of a Call of Duty campaign, but it is interesting. I'm watching your gameplay now, and I think this is really driving home the freeform nature of how you approach missions, because you've taken a route through this level that I didn't even know existed. Like we took completely different way, and you stayed completely in stealth, and so did I. So there are multiple ways you can approach this mission and still achieve the same goal. And I think that's awesome, because I think Call of Duty in the past has really been taken out for being, just this roller coaster, which has its pros. I think that's why it can sometimes feel like a very tuned and very directed blockbuster movie. But I think they are trying to experiment with different ways to tell their stories and different ways to engage players in these sorts of campaigns. And I respect that, because it's very easy to just do the same thing over and over again. I agree with you. The combat, the shooting feels really good. This is what the series is known for, and I think they nail it again here. I don't know. I'm lacking some motivation from definitely the story so far. There's just like this shadowy organization that came out of nowhere, and now every time you engage in a mission, you're running into them, and they are causing havoc. And I'm not super invested in the returning characters from Black Ops, so maybe that is a thing that is hampering my experience. But there's elements that just don't vibe well, even with the freeform nature of the missions. Like the one you'll do after the footage you show now is more of a stealth mission akin to the one, I think it was in Cold War, where you infiltrate like the Kremlin, and it's a more not shooting, stealth, gathering intel sort of mission. And I just don't think those work in this context. The stealth in those areas is very rudimentary and boring, and you're just kind of following a path. Go to this point in the map, go to that point, go to that point. Cool, now you're in the shooting part of the mission, and I think that feels like it's wasting my time. But I'm curious to see, the other ways in which they try and experiment with the campaign. The mission I'm on now is more like an open hub, where I've got 3 objectives and I can kind of take them on in any order, which is very similar to some of the things they tried in Modern Warfare 3. So maybe it improves. I know there's been a lot of praise for this campaign so far. But yeah, that's just my takeaway from, basically like the first third of the campaign, that I respect the ideas. They're just not they're not gelling with me just yet, but maybe they will later on.
Yeah. I think I want to touch on we mentioned it earlier, the Omni movement system, which basically, in a nutshell, in previous Call of Duties, you could sprint forward and you could kind of steer where you were going forward, whereas Omni movements just removes all those restrictions, and it opens up movement in a way I didn't quite expect. I know you're saying it felt a bit weird at first, but it's kind of nice to just be able to go fast in any way you want. I don't know how you go away from that now. It's one of those changes where I wonder if they don't just keep it for future Call of Duties. And I'm pretty sure I stand to be corrected, but there's something about aiming around cover in this game where the weapon, like, it kind of like anchors you to the corner and the weapon moves with you, and it feels good as well. I think that's new to this game, and I like that. I think those are two. Like, I don't know how you make Call of Duty better every year. I think you've been doing it so long. How do you introduce improvements to make it feel better? And those are two, actually, to me, like very small touches, but that, make a world of difference in how the game feels. So I do enjoy that, or appreciate that rather.
Yeah, I agree. I think initially the omnidirectional movement was a bit like, oh, this feels odd. Like, I just don't understand. My brain, I think, was getting used to the idea of never losing momentum when you change direction and being able to move at the same speed in any direction, because it's just so counterintuitive to how these games have worked in the past. But once I got comfortable with it, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think I can go back. It just feels cool. And I think especially in the multiplayer, there's going to be instances where people are pulling off ridiculous things. Like the fact that you can dive through the air sideways, maintain momentum, and shoot at the same time is going to lead to some insane clips, I think, from multiplayer. And yeah, like you said, I think it's a change that they can't go back from, at least now, but it reinvigorates how the game feels, and doesn't just feel like the same thing year on year. The same thing with that corner anchoring. I know in Modern Warfare, you could do that, but it was a purposeful thing. Like if you got to a corner, you had to click, or on console, you had to click in a stick, and then you would anchor to the side of that a cover. Here, it's just natural. It's like you get to a corner and it does it, and it feels good. I think it predicts what you're trying to do very, very well. And I'm never like, oh God, why is it popping me out on the side of cover as opposed to on top of it? It feels really good. So yeah, the core action is, I think, fantastic, and I'm curious to see how that translates into the multiplayer. Have you messed with the multiplayer at all?
I've played like literally 2 matches of multiplayer, and I never. It's interesting because I'm not deep enough into Call of Duty to tell you like the multiplayer is better or worse. My general takeaway from the multiplayer is that it's good. Like, it feels good. It's that signature. There's I play Team Deathmatch and Kill Confirmed, like 2 popular Call of Duty modes where it's just run around, get killed, respawn immediately. It's like non-stop action for the 10 minutes that it lasts, and it just feels good. In this game, I think year after year, in terms of sound design, how weapons feel, that sort of thing, like I can't really fault them. But again, I'm not deep enough to know like, oh yeah, like this is a step back from last year because the sound isn't as good or whatever. To me, it always just sounds good and it feels good. Maybe the hardcore fans feel otherwise. I can't tell you from our very limited time playing it. I mean, I'm obviously going to play more in the coming week or two. It feels like Call of Duty, which is a good thing. Like, it feels good to run around and get, like, when you get a kill streak, man, that's a signature Call of Duty thing, and it feels good to go like, yeah, I'm doing well. I'm being rewarded by getting like a UAV or a rocket launch or whatever the hell it is you've got, And I think it's got all the things you'd expect of tons of weapons, so much progression you can do, so many different attachments you can mess around with. I know there's the old faithful perk system. I think there's an interesting format here where there's 3 sort of categories, and I don't know what the actual names, but it's the usual like assault, recon, and a third one. And you can build a character choosing 3 perks from each. However, if you choose 3 perks from the same like category, so like I choose 3 assault perks, I get a bonus 4th perk included for free, which does something.
Okay. That's cool.
So it's just there's depth from that point of view as well. Like, how do you build your operator? What weapon you use? What attachments you use? Like, there's going to be all that depth, which again I can't talk to because I'm not deep enough into Call of Duty, but I know it's there, and just the general gunplay feels nice. So yeah. That's my.
It's funny. I think Black Ops has kind of been that the parts of this franchise that has always tried to innovate the most. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Black Ops 2 that first introduced the like build a class system where you had like 10 points and you could spend them accordingly to build the class in your manner. You determine what kill streaks you have, determine what equipment you have, but within the confines of this 10-point system, which at the time was like revolutionary for the series, because prior to that, it was a very fixed system that was introduced in Modern Warfare 4. So it's cool to see Black Ops now, so many years later, probably over a decade later, still kind of be the hallmark of the series that takes risks and does new things. And I think Treyarch specifically should be praised for that, because out of the 3 developers that this rotates between, or is it 2 now, they are the ones willing to make these big bets. And I guess they're given time to make these big bets, which is cool, because it redefines what Call of Duty is going forward. And I think that's what's kept the series going, I don't think that the series reaches the same heights, or at least feels like it is the moment of the year like it used to. I remember it used to be such a big thing, when a Call of Duty released, and I just don't feel it gets the same excitement now. But it's still getting the same amount of players, and the multiplayer is still popular, so it's still hitting in the same way. So it's cool to see innovation in that space as well. Yeah. It is very bizarre. I think we were saying before the show, for it to start really catching up on historical events that that I'm aware of and remember. Like the Bill Clinton campaign and Iraq and Saddam Hussein and stuff like that. It's interesting, because I guess people who are playing Call of Duty at the ages we were in, the late 2007, 2008, they now have no like relevance for those historical events, but us being older kind of do. It's bizarre and weird and just interesting at the same time. Just a funny thing that kind of like stuck in my brain yesterday when I played a mission and fucking Bill Clinton was on the stage at like a senator event. It was just weird.
Like, what is going on? Am I old?
Yeah, what's happening? Yeah. Am I old? Yes, definitely. That's definitely what went through my head. So yeah, Black Ops 6. We'll see. I don't know if I'll finish the campaign. I can tell that you definitely are going to. Maybe I'll mess around with the multiplayer, and especially the zombies mode seems to be
that I haven't even tried yet.
Yeah. It's it seems to have gone back to some fundamentals, because I think that aspect spiraled out of control. It became like a very convoluted and complicated thing that you can just jump into and have some PvE fun with friends. And so I'm excited to give that another go and see if it really has delivered on that front. It's cool. I'm very curious to see how this pans out for Microsoft more than anything. So we'll see how that goes, near the end of the year and into next year.
What's next? Which Call of Duty is next? Modern Warfare.
I actually don't know. Yeah, probably another Modern Warfare. Yeah, I think there was a leak on what it would be. If I'm not mistaken, it's another like sci-fi based one. I might be wrong about this.
No, you're right. It was. I think it was like rumored to be a sequel to Black Ops 3, which was a sci-fi
or Advanced Warfare or something like that.
Which. But if it is that, if like it's a sequel to Black Ops, I'm like, what do you call it?
Yeah, I mean, who the hell knows at this point?
In Call of Duty now, I laughed because one of my friends, he asked on Discord, he was like he basically along the lines of like explain Call of Duty now, like is Modern Warfare like a remaster? Is it a remake? Where is it chronologically? I'm like, just look at the wiki page. There's so much going on here.
Yeah, so you're right. I'm just looking at some reporting from like 2 weeks ago. Call of Duty series looks to take players back to the future in 2025 with the Black Ops 2 sequel set in the early 2030s. Interesting.
Oh, it's Black
Ops 2 in the future was fucking cool. Like, that game ruled. It was really, really fun, and it was interesting to see Black Ops jump from like Vietnam and the start of the Cold War to near future sort of thing. I'd be down for that. I really love the future-based Call of Duty games. I've loved Advanced Warfare. I dug was it Infinite Warfare, which was like in like fucking space. I think they're cool. They get to get really silly and fun with those sorts of games. So
we'll see. Cool, but that is Call of Duty Black Ops 6.
And that's kind of what we've been playing. There's so much coming out still. There was a new Sonic game that came out. There's, like I said, Dragon Age coming out. there's a bunch of stuff in November. I can't off the top of my head think about it, but I think we've hit the most of the big marquee games for the year, and I think the rest of the ones on the calendar could be nice, neat surprises that kind of blow us away in a similar way to like Alan Wake 2 last year. So curious to see what fills that hole. And next thing we know, we're going to be at beginning of December with Keeley's Awards and kind of getting a picture of what 2025 is going to look like. We kind of got that with that Xbox showcase this week. Like, got to see Remedy's new game, which looks sick. Set in the Control universe, looks like a Left 4 Dead like there. We are bound to get a Switch announcement before the end of the year.
2025.
Like, almost certainly.
Switch, let's go.
Certainly. It was actually, I think, this past week or the week prior, the 8-year anniversary of the first Switch trailer. That one where people were playing like Mario Kart on a ceiling and stuff like that.
What is that lady's name?
Karen.
Was
wasn't
it Karen?
I think it was Karen.
God,
yeah,
Karen.
it's kind of wild that was 8 years ago. I had to do like a double take. It's like, Jesus, it's now like, I think officially the longest period of time between Nintendo console releases. So,
but the Switch
fascinating
continues to be a great little console. I mean, I'm not going to talk about it this week, but I'm still playing The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. And that's at the end of the Switch life cycle, and we've spoken about
still a great game.
Performance hiccups, but still a great game regardless.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. I'm really curious to see what the next one is. I do think it's just going to be a very probably conservative iteration on the Switch, and I'm totally fine with that because it's probably one of the best consoles I've ever owned. So I mean, we are fast approaching the launch of the PS5 Pro. I know that's out in the next week or two overseas, but locally in South Africa, we're only getting it, I think it's 13th of December, if I'm not mistaken. So I have no plans to get one. I don't know if you're in the same boat.
Nah.
I'm kind of pretty happy with PS5 and its performance. If we get one for review, cool. I'll give that a look. I'm not clamoring to go and grab one.
When the PS4 Pro came out, that was the time I was like, my PS4 is struggling a little. Like, it feels like it could use a little bump in power. Whereas the PS5 now, I'm like, no. I can't tell you I've played a game and gone like, oof, like this game's really struggling to run.
It doesn't feel like it's been tapped.
No.
It feels like there's so much still to extract from that.
Whereas the PS4, it did feel like this hardware, like games they run, but they could run a little bit better. PS5, I'm like, no, like I'll do quality or performance, like whatever. I don't need 4K.
And I mean, those things are not going away. As much as Mark Cerny made a big deal in that reveal thing that it's like, you will never have to think about performance modes again. I mean, just this week, Ratchet and Clank got its PS5 Pro modes detailed, and there's a quality and performance mode. It's like there's a 30 FPS and 60 FPS. Alan Wake is the same thing, and I'm like, I don't think that's bad. No. I'm just saying Sony's messaging was just so weird around this thing that you definitely have people now going, well, why the hell am I paying $700 for this console where it still has performance and quality modes? It's like, yes, it's good to have player choice, but I just wish Sony didn't market it as like, you will never have to think about this again. Like, that's just bullshit.
We are so have to think about it for still the next many years of gaming, unless something changes.
And I think the PS4 Pro came at a point where TVs were at an inflection point, like 4K was becoming a norm, HDR was a brand new thing, so having a console that supported that was a big deal, whereas now it's just a fidelity argument in terms of games, which, I 100% think that people are going to think that's worth it. I know Jeff and Darren have orders in for theirs. That's cool. I don't feel the overwhelming need to go and get one, especially with a Switch 2 on the horizon. Like, I'd rather
I'd rather buy a Switch 2, honestly. Yeah. 100%. Switch 2 to new Mario, let's go.
Yeah, let's go. I'm keen. That's been episode 259 of Checkpoint Chat. As always, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Matty, for providing all these hot metaphor takes.
You're welcome.
Hot out of the oven. I'm pretty sure we'll be back pretty soon. There's just so much to talk about, and we're enjoying covering a lot of these games coming out. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Hope you stay safe. Enjoy the last sprint until the end of the year, and we will see you very soon. Okay, bye.
Goodbye.